Good afternoon, and welcome to the Middle East Forum's webinar and podcast, Israel Insider, this week with Alex Selsky. I'm Stacey Roman, and I will be moderating this discussion today. We're pleased to have Alex Selsky, Senior Advisor to the Middle East Forum's Israel Victory Project and lecturer at Hadassah Academic College, join us this week to update us on all the events going on in Israel. Mr. Selsky will be giving us a briefing on current Israeli affairs for 15 minutes, then open it up for questions. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. And with that, I will turn the discussion over to Mr. Alex Selsky.
Stacey, thank you very much, and good evening from Jerusalem, Israeli evening and afternoon at your time. Well, Stacey, as you said, I will update about all the happening in Israel, but it's impossible to update about everything that happens in Israel, definitely not in 15 minutes, as you know, in Israel, we have so many news and so many things happening all the time. So we'll try to give you, the major things, and there are definitely things that we have to update about. So let me give you the previous chapters, because we really need to, to go a little about a month ago in order to understand what's happening this week. So as you remember, in April, we all spoke about the fact that judicial reform is on hold, and that at the moment that the Knesset will be back, they will put aside the reform, and they will all concentrate in passing the budget, and budget must be passed until the end of May, otherwise the government may just fall. And the other thing that we all spoke about in April, that definitely with all the things happening with all the demonstrations and all the split within the Israeli society and all the attempts of our enemies around, around the area, around the region, to try us again, thinking that they might use this opportunity, that something will happen. So both things happened. We had the operation Shield and Arrow, and the budget passed exactly last Wednesday. So at the moment that both things happened, what everybody accepted that would happen now, the reform will be back. But surprise, I live next to a Knesset where all the demonstrations usually come by through. And I was expecting that this week, from all the sides, we'll have demonstrations, those who want the reform back and those who want to postpone the reform, but there is quiet. So what's happening? First of all, there are many things that bother Israelis after the budget and after the operations, And the major thing that I think that every house and every family feels and speaks and manages itself to prepare to is the cost of living, the rise of cost of living, the inflation, the prices just, go up in every field, except maybe here and there. We see that because of again, the central bank raised the interest rate, so we see that the prices of the housing are not going higher because of that, but we do see the mortgages go up. Now, the situation is very similar to what's happening in Europe and what's happening in the States, even a bit lower. But I think that now these months and during the next months, we'll see the inflation in Israel trying to catch up the inflation in the United States and in Europe, because we hear almost from every industry, from every market, that the prices will go up, and the government doesn't succeed to lower this wave. And there is a very high and very big criticism on this budget that just passed, that it's not really providing, that it doesn't provide really the expected tools to fight inflation, to fight the prices. And, government tries to explain that it does, but we just don't see it. The interest rate now is in Israel stands now on 4.75%. It's very close to the interest rates of the Federal Reserve in the United States of 5.25. So a average mortgage raised in 1,000 shekels for average family, which is a lot, which is about $300. This is a lot, and people don't buy houses, so the prices of the housing, again, as I said, a bit in stagnation, but all the rest is going high, and that's what definitely bothers people. Other two things that happened this week that I think definitely worth mentioning, because these are two big things. Some of them might look not so big, but I think that we will see their effects on Israeli society and Israeli politics and Israeli economy, and definitely on international relations for a long period ahead. The first thing is that the leader of the one of the biggest community within the ultra-Orthodox community, the Lithuanian community, Litvak, as they call themselves, died at the age of 100 years old. Gershon Edelstein, who was born in the Soviet Union 100 years ago and made Aliyat to Israel when he was at the age of 10, I think, or 11. And he was actually the last leader that had, I think, the influence that could unite all the Litva community, and everybody speaks about the fact that from now on, it will be a new era of leadership, and this community, which is one of the two biggest communities within the ultra-Orthodox communities, that it will not be led in a united form, and 3 rabbis will be leading the Litva community, and it means that it will be much more concentrated, much more competition. We will see much more split, and I think it will affect the politics of the ultra-Orthodox community, and definitely the way it will integrate into the general society, and I think it will cause more integration, not less. Now, the Litvak community are those who are represented by Degel Israel party movement, which is one of the 2 parties that are united in the ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi list called Yadut Torah, the Judaism of the Torah. The Judaism of the Torah are 2 parties, as I said, Agudat Israel and Degel Torah. Degel Torah are those who represent the Litvak community, and Agudat Israel are those who represent the Hasidic, primarily the belts. And I think it also it must affect this cooperation. So let's see in the next elections how it will affect, the fact that there is much less concentrated leadership within Degel Torah. I think it's a major event, a social and political event in Israel. Another event that I think also very worth mentioning is that for the first time since since Israel left Gaza and northern Shomron, since the disengagement, Israel formally approved that the yeshiva in Homesh is a settlement between, within the triangle of Jenin, Shechem, and Tulkarim, more closer to Shechem in northern Shomron, not the most northern Shomron, but northern Shomron and Shomron, Samaria, northern Samaria, and Homesh is one of the 3 settlements that were removed during the disengagement. And now the yeshiva that was active in this settlement in Homesh is back, but it moved from private Palestinian land to the state land with the approval of the army and with the approval of the defense minister. Now, we have the international community, definitely the Europeans and the White House stating against it, claiming that it's illegal, that it's against the law. But first of all, Israel passed a law that cancels the disengagement in the northern Samaria just a few months ago. So in terms of the law within Israel, it's all legal. Okay, it's on state land. It's by formal approval of the army. That's, I remind you that the army, the IDF, is the body that controls Judea and Samaria and manages the life in Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian and the Jewish as well. And it's done by this law, which cancels the disengagement. But the White House and the State Department claim that Israeli government promised not to do that, not to revive these settlements in northern Samaria. So it's definitely, by their claim, is against these promises. It doesn't help the so far not so easy relationship between the current Prime Minister and the current White House. We see that Netanyahu haven't been yet invited to the White House, and we see that it's not on the horizon. Even though we heard that, the White House said that if the judicial reform will be fully canceled, then we definitely would see, a warmer cooperation and invitation of the Prime Minister to come to Israel. But we don't see it so far. So now that's the time to come back to where I started from and to speak about the judicial reform, which, first of all, everybody is expecting to come back. It doesn't come back. And everybody asks, okay, what's the faith of the reform? Definitely from the angle of the relationship with the United States, as I stated before. Definitely understanding that that's the next big crisis, political crisis. Understanding that it was put on hold for the budget and for everything else that the government had to pass in order to survive. So what's now? And here I think we must pay attention to 2 things. First is that apparently Netanyahu had a poll by which he definitely saw that the Israeli public prefers wide agreement on the judicial reform. And if he now brings it back, as by the way, exactly after the passing of the budget, he was asked by a journalist. So now everybody is waiting for the reform. So where is the reform? Will it be back? And he said, definitely it will be, fully back. So apparently we see that Netanyahu really keeps the track of the negotiations with the opposition, with the Yesh Atid and Machaneh Mamlachti, with Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid, and the presidents, by the supervision of the president, Yitzhak Herzog. Let's see, and the sign of it is also the cooperation between the sides in a nomination of the Knesset representative to the committee that chooses the judges. And the second thing that we definitely must pay attention to is yesterday's or today's even speech of Yariv Levin in the Knesset, speaking about the reform. And it was very hard speech, very emotional. And, you know, the leading Israeli journalist, Amit Segal, called it a speech of frustration speech. And he said, listen, that's not a speech. He said, you just, you know, watch it on mute. And if you see the body language, it's definitely not the body language of someone who is, you know, in a controlling role in the government. It's a body language of someone who is losing, of an opposition leader. So it definitely looks like a speech of frustration. And today, Amit Segal spoke in the news, apparently after briefing of Yariv Levin himself or people close to him, that Yariv Levin during the next couple of weeks will see what's the faith of the reform and see what's his next step, and if the reform will be not progressed, he will resign. So it definitely will be the next crisis. I don't know if it will be the next crisis within the coalition, but it definitely will be a big crisis within Likud. And maybe for coalition, definitely as well, because we all understand that the reform was not only interest of Yariv Levin or Netanyahu, it was interest of all the partners of the coalition, definitely of the ultra-Orthodox and of the religion Zionists. So we will definitely speak about the reform again in a couple of weeks. 16 minutes after 10, and I think we can approach the questions.
Very wonderful. Thank you so much. So the first question we have is from Don Sable asking, do you think many of the protesters against judicial reform do not know many of the details besides the issue of the Knesset's override of the Supreme Court, and little about the issues of standing, judiciability, reasonableness, unreasonableness, lawyers? Yeah. So do you think that they understand like the full facts, or is if that's the case, are the protests about more than just judicial reform?
Very good question. You know, some will claim that people overall don't understand usually things happening that they criticize. You know, I'm sure that we all can find researches about, you know, the level of understanding of an average voter about, I don't know, economy when he goes to vote in the elections, or, you know, what is the process of legislation in the certain country, whatever country it is in. I'm not sure we will find a very deep knowledge of all the processes. So overall, I think that really you know, the level of deep knowledge of average citizen, not even Israel, average citizen within any democracy, we will find it much lower than higher. Let's be gentle. And again, and everybody from its side, you know, within a democracy and within every you know, sector that he lives in, be it left or right, be it, you know, some sector of ethnical or national, people, you know, people don't they don't search for information in, you know, sources of information outside their sector of of a connection, of identification. So I definitely think that, on both sides, again, of every split, the left or the protesters, they read what they want to prove their opinion. So I definitely think that if we just let people know, search, research, and know much deeper the claims, the history, the data, they will always reveal that it's much less than they want, that they think, because it's always, it's always stereotypes of knowledge. I'm sure that if you just go to some secular, I don't know what, Tel Aviv, and ask people about take it about ultra-Orthodox, now the budget passed, okay? So many budgets were given to ultra-Orthodox. Now the coalition claims that it's all, affirmative action that provides budgets that were taken from the ultra-Orthodox, and the seculars say no, they take it and they use us and think. Now I'm sure that after all the truth is somewhere in the middle. That if we go deeper, we find that that we all use some information that that builds stereotypes. So the secular don't really know. They say that ultra-Orthodox, they don't work and they don't serve. That's not right. Many work and many serve. And the opposite, those say, the secular are not Jewish, they forgot how to be Jewish. I'm quoting, Netanyahu's very popular quote. I'm sure that if we just go, and learn about the so-called secular, we find that many of them are observers and from not maybe religious, but from definitely traditional families. I hope I answered.
Thank you. So in the past, we've talked about how the judicial reform, most of the issues were coming from how quickly it was being pushed through. Do you think that now it's getting the proper discussion, which is leading to the less protests and can come to some sort of cooperation on this?
I think that just everybody is now, waiting what's happening, what the negotiations will bring. And everybody, on low starts, with all his equipment, and people are just waiting for attacking the other side if they don't get what they want. So those who are in favor just wait, okay, if if we now see that the deal is bad for us, we will attack. And the other side the same. So I think that just everybody now sits and waits, and all the sides tell their supporters to sit and wait for the negotiations and for some agreed format of the reform that would come out. Yeah, these talks, what it will be, how it will be, when it will be. Please don't ask me. I don't want to commit to something that nobody knows, but definitely we will see in a couple of weeks that we will come to some culmination of these pressure on every side, and these expectations will be either satisfied or it will be a huge, huge blow.
Thank you. And you talked about an impending divide in the ultra-Orthodox party. So we're seeing a lot of power and strength, I guess, right now with policies being passed. How will this expected divide going forward affect politics now and in the future? Will more laws be pushed through while they're still united?
Excuse me, the question is about the split within the ultra-Orthodox community or general?
Correct, with the passing of the Lithuanian leader.
And the question is again, sorry.
So right now where we're seeing the ultra-Orthodox kind of in a position of power, do you see that divide affecting this going forward?
Well, definitely, I think that the very fact of decentralization of the power will not strengthen them, because it will be more competition, it will be more splits. So definitely, I think it might, and it's expected to reduce their influence. How will it? I don't know. I remind you that, the previous leader, which was much bigger, Rabbi Kanevsky, passed out only 1 year ago in March 2022. And also before that, when the bigger rabbi of Litvaks, Rabbi Elyashiv, when he died, everybody spoke that, okay, now, he's the last leader. We don't know how it will be. Everything will just, fall. But things happen and didn't really, I think, we didn't see really big changes. But again, I think that these changes are, first of all, we don't really see them, on on the surface. And also, I think that these processes, these things happen slow. But now, yes, we hear, I think, more than previously, more than after Kanevsky passed out and more than after Elyashiv passed out, we hear that was the last, era of one united leadership and one rabbi, and everybody speaks about three. So yes, I think that this situation is new now, even if it's, if the change will not be, this, but it takes us another step lower, another step lower, another step lower, another step lower. We are in some crave going down. How it will go, what pace, to what results it will cause, I don't know. But we do see a change that will affect the politics and affect the economy and affect the integration, because I think less people will feel committed. So so more people will feel freer to, not to obey, because the leadership status of three apparently will be lower than the leadership status of one. So that's, I think it's logic, and that's what definitely would happen.
Understood. Thank you. Eric asks, in recent polls, does Benny Gantz, blue and white, still have a higher popularity than Likud?
Yes, it's lower. The gap is lower, though, than it was before the Operation Shield and Arrow, because I think that much of the fall of Likud and Netanyahu before the operation was because he was blamed by a weak reaction to the rockets that we saw from Lebanon and rockets that we had from Gaza. So he was definitely blamed on being weak. And, while seeing all the our enemies, that we saw Syrian president participating in Arab League conference, and we see that Hezbollah feels much stronger to let Hamas fire rockets from Lebanon. So I think that this fall was because of that. And after the operation, Netanyahu, he closed the gap. He didn't close it fully. So now it's like 27 versus 28, but it's one now. It's definitely less than it was. But again, polls, when there are no elections, don't mean much. Elections, it's an event that happened at very certain time on very certain events, very certain agenda. And you may relate to that as this. So now I think it's very amateur to think that these polls are correct, but the polls show tendency. The polls show tendency, and the tendency definitely shows that the agreement over the reform is something that people want, because that's the position of Gantz, and that's how he goes up. And we definitely see that people want security, which they didn't feel that Netanyahu provides. And I hope it means that they want unity within Israel, and they don't want to see the split. They don't want to see people in the army who say that they will not come. They want us strong, and they want us victorious, and they want us to defeat our enemies and to be strong again, let's say, before all the split that took place few last months. I hope that's what it means.
I'm sure we all hope that. Well, thank you so much. We've come to the close for our webinar and podcast. Alex, thank you for taking time to update us this week.
Thank you.
Of course.
Goodbye.
For our viewers and listeners, please join us Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern for a webinar with Oren Kessler discussing Palestine 1936, the Great Revolt of the Roots of the Middle East Conflict. And the roots of the Middle East conflict. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.